Sorry, I'm on slide 3. After the weight. Oh, there? An argument is, isn't it a bit dishonest to become a Christian as a way to hedge your bets and try to avoid infinite loss? So is that really true belief, or is it sort of playing a part? We're talking about a wager, but you're not talking about the odds. So does this make sense if you're going to apply a bit of a game theory approach to it? Agree to this wager, though it's true or not. We're assuming that non-belief sends you to hell or some kind of punishment, so there's that as well. And we're also assuming being a Christian sends you to heaven. None of these exist in the wager. There's no reason from the wager to assume that the whole arrangement is valid. So the argument as it stands is pretty weak. It's not very convincing. At its own time, it was very criticized, and it continues to be criticized today. So what I want to do is I want to try and put this in context with Pascal himself. So if you go to the next slide, well, if you're not aware of who he was a mid-17th century mathematician and physicist, and later on philosopher. Child prodigy. He made major contributions to probability theory through his work with was it Fermat? I forget. Projective geometry, fluid mechanics. He did a lot to disprove the idea that a vacuum is physically impossible. He invented one of the first mechanical calculators. And in his 20s, he experienced a kind of intellectual conversion. So at this point in his life, in addition to science, he also started to write theological treatises. It wasn't his main work, very kind of intellectual. She was influenced by a group called Janicists, who kind of like Calvinist Catholics, believed in destination and the idea of election. I don't believe that they believed in assurance of salvation, but his influence, or his respondence to this with Janicists, I think, controversial with more mainstream Catholics. So if you go to the next slide, experienced what he came to call the night of fire. So after he died, when his body was being tended to before the burial, I believe it was one of his maids discovered a piece of paper sewn up into the lining of his coat. And on the paper, it said this: the year of grace, 1654, Monday the 23rd of November, on the feast of St. Clement, from about 10:30 in the evening until about 10:30 midnight, fire, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Jesus Christ, your God will be my God. So very cryptic note, only he kept it on his body at all times, ever since then. And through diaries, and what happened was he had a intense this experience, a vision of sorts when he was reading about the crucifixion. He had a bit of a similar experience as well to his journals, this sort of true conversions, like beyond his intellectual conversion, true conversion. Pascal came to call his night of fire. And that was really like, he became, and when he was, after that, he devoted himself almost entirely to apology and apologetics, and he been a defender of Christianity. So there, some biographers refer to the pre-Night of Fire Pascal, early Pascal. The Fire Pascal as the Pascal. Smart cookie. Now, if we go to the next slide, it's helpful with Pascal to remember when he lived up against him. So he, in these days, often the world we live in, post-Christendom, like the age of Christianity is over, more or less. People would argue that Pascal himself was the first true post-Christendom apologist, and he was essentially just been catching up to him. Accounts absolutely despised. I think he referred to his philosophy as worthless and unforgivable and a couple of other things. So they were rather enemies. They had very different approaches to philosophy. And Pascal was a kind of deist who believed God as a sort of someone who sets up the dominoes and then some of the flick and gets the move after that. From it all, it's a very impersonal God, which held well with the emerging of enlightenment. It's era of humanism and rationalism, or triumph of philosophy. We have Voltaire, who lived a little bit after Pascal, one of the atheists, satirists. I don't know if anyone here has read Ken. It was a time in the power of the church. This was post-Reformation as well, so the political power of the Catholic Church in particular was shaken, the intellectual power of Christianity as a whole also being shaken. The ism, as they used to call it, not so often open atheism, but what was essentially atheism beginning to take its foothold in sort of educated class. It was extremely fashionable amongst philosophers. You also have David Hume, who wrote a lot against the possibility of miracles. I think that's what I think he called it the improbability of miracles, arguing that miracles in the Bible are more likely not to have taken place than to have taken place, and therefore the idea of this performed or a sort of miraculous God that interferes in the natural world is believing it. So he was living in this age of skepticism, this age of nationalism, empiricism that really was starting to take aim at the value of faith. So that's where he lived. All right, so his apologetics is basically built upon the wisdom literature of the Bible. Ecclesiastes teaches us the vanity of endeavor, and Job, which teaches us sort of the reality of evil, the capriciousness of fate. Inevitability of suffering. So, if you go to the next slide,